Well, good morning, everybody. First thing I'm going to do today is look at some satellite data. And this is just as the sun was rising here across the central part of the United States. We got three systems we're going to be on the lookout for. The first is actually a very interesting subtropical system that is just here off the East Coast. It's kind of rare to see something like this showing up this time of year. The second is the first of two large lows that are curling up through the Midwest. They kind of begin in Colorado and finish in the Great Lakes. And then the third is this is really our last system coming into the western United States here for a while as the flow begins to retract and split in the Gulf of Alaska. But I want to show you this one over here real quick. Because if I go back to last night, let's just go back here and see where the sun was up last night. This is a very interesting subtropical low that's just off the coast, and it's sitting there spinning. It's what's delivering the moisture on the northern side of this. It's bringing in some snow this morning into parts of New England. And that particular system, again, just kind of a rare setup. So the low that's going over parts of Iowa today is going to have to be watched very carefully, as is the one that's going to be following this. So let's kind of dig into this. First, the setup. I put this map at the front end of today's report just to kind of highlight the last 2 weeks in terms of precipitation anomalies. And what's going to be changing a lot in this upcoming forecast is just the relentless onshore flow that's been in the western United States. The split's going to start to deliver more systems that come in from the northwest. This could change the precipitation pattern for parts of the northern plains, especially parts of the Ohio River Valley. We could be delivering better moisture into the Gulf Coast and the East Coast. There are several dry places in here, as you can see. We need to continue to watch for the change in the pattern that could deliver better moisture farther to the west in the southern plains. Now, just to highlight how much moisture has come into the west, I did want to show you the latest data from Lake Oroville. So from its lows of, let's see here again, about 658 feet in early December 2022, since the start of the year, it has come up 70 feet in depth. And then, of course, you go back here, this is almost 120 feet of increase. So the lake is very close to where it is normally for this time of year, the historical average, and there's still quite a bit more moisture that's going to get in there. The snowpack is the other place where we're watching, of course, for the western United States, whole kind of water health picture. And again, we continue to see a lot of the reporting stations in here somewhere in the 200 to 300% range. Now, what will be changing in the upcoming forecast is more systems could come in here delivering better snowpack for the northern United States, and there is a chance for better southern Rockies snowpack buildup here with this upcoming trough we'll show you in just a few moments. But one map I would like to show you, again, this is the accumulated snowfall departure map. And last week there had been pretty good evidence that a snowstorm was going to come into this particular area this week. But the only thing that's changed is that area that is in a bit of a deficit for snowfall this year, it has shifted north in its track, putting more of the snow back over some areas that have seen quite a bit of it. Given the lack of a good block in the North Atlantic, it's been very difficult to get systems to curl up the East Coast and just deliver very heavy snow to this area. There are a couple of things changing as we go into February that might start to increase that likelihood. I'll show you those in just a few seconds. But let's go right to the high-res NAM and kind of see where this morning's low currently sits. Now, one of the things we're going to be seeing out of this is that there is a highly sheared environment right in through this part of Iowa, Illinois, this region and through here. And there is a bit of instability inside of what we call the warm sector of this storm. Now, the models, they're starting to resolve maybe tonight. Do you see this right in through here? The possibility of some low-topped but rotating storms. And so I cannot rule out the risk of some isolated stronger storms in this area. But ahead of it, a lot of just cold rain with some snow mixed back in the upper Midwest, like the Red River Valley, and then a lot of cold rain out ahead of this. Now, this system is not nearly as potent as the one following it, but what you just saw here over the West Coast, if we go back, this is kind of our last event. This is the last strong onshore event coming through California this morning and spreading into Nevada and the Four Corners states by tonight. So as system number one moves to the Great Lakes and the front comes toward the Appalachian Mountains and then clears into parts of, like, for example, North Carolina, Virginia, tomorrow with chances of isolated storms, but mostly a kind of a cooler rain event here. The next system begins to take shape right here over the Four Corners states. Now, this is the one we're going to have to watch carefully. There's a bit more colder air on the backside of this, therefore better chances of snow coming out of Colorado going into Nebraska. We do have to look out for some overrunning here, giving us the risk of some ice. But as we just think about where this system's going to go, I need to flip over to the European model to kind of give you a better idea on this. So let's pick up here Wednesday morning, Wednesday afternoon, and evening. Now, while that snow is falling on the northern side of this, and again, there's the risk of ice in parts of Iowa, we need to keep an eye on this area for the risk of strong to severe storms, okay? Because there is, again, going to be a pretty sharp cold front that comes through here and plenty of instability out ahead of it. And you can see the model picking up on the risk of those storms. So this low, by the time we get into Thursday morning, afternoon, and evening, curls its way up through the eastern Great Lakes, and it continues to move into the Canadian Maritimes here. Okay, so this is the position of this next low. So it'll clear the East Coast by the time we get into Friday. Now at this point, the pattern is kind of in its full adjustment, and now troughs are going to be coming in via the Gulf of Alaska. So going into this weekend, we're going to watch a couple of things. This is Saturday going forward. Did you notice how coming out of the Four Corner states, possibly into the southern plains and along the Gulf Coast, there's a low that could be forming there? So we have this deeper low that comes down and tries to eject, and the next one comes in following it in this direction. And what's important about this is going to return moisture to places that have been very dry as of late, potentially down here in the south and along the Gulf Coast, and then again into parts of the Pacific Northwest and also parts of Montana, which have missed out on a lot of this precip. So this is what we're looking at all the way out to next weekend. All right, so let's kind of distill this down into a couple of maps here. This is our best chance at getting at least 6 inches of snow out of this next system that's coming through the Midwest, right in through here. There's heavier snows in New England, some of this coming today from the low we talked about, that subtropical low. But we've also seen the models increasing for the southern Rockies, better chances of snowfall. We can look at a couple of other maps too. This one is looking at just the next, again, 7 days from today's European run. So from Colorado into Nebraska, this is where we could see the heaviest snowfall, then clipping most of the northern half of Iowa, hitting this part of Minnesota into Wisconsin and the UP. So that's, again, that snow swath for the second system that emerges in the middle of this week. I want to also show you, let's come back to that map in a second. I also want to show you by Monday where that trough I mentioned over the Four Corner states could be. So the pattern goes back into this high amplitude state like this as the jet stream retracts and breaks up, which we talked a lot about last week. And this is going to be the low that could initiate that storm system that curls into Texas out of the Four Corner states. So see it right there? Now, the big unknowns as we go forward out to day 10 is, where is this southeast ridge going to be? And is it going to be strong? Because that would prevent this trough from really digging really far to the East Coast and cranking a big system up the East Coast. So we've got the wrong kind of setup. It's too far west in order to deliver a big East Coast cyclone. But as that trough comes through, take a look. This is starting off 2 days from now, and let's just play it through. You see the snow getting added down here? That's the change in the pattern. Can you see it coming in the northwest and diving through the Rockies? So the additional maybe 1 to 2 feet in the Sierra Nevada, that's all coming in the very near term. After that, the flow is coming in like this, improving chances for snow in Montana all the way down to New Mexico. So let's watch out for that pretty closely here. Now, here's the big change in the overall precipitation pattern. This is the probability of less than 1/10 of an inch on the left and more than an inch on the right. So we clearly see our wettest corridor is now beginning to stretch farther back into Oklahoma, into Texas, but really setting up through parts of the lower and mid-Mississippi River Valley through the Ohio Valley. And again, a lot of this will be snow with the second system coming through. But with the split flow now showing up, we've now seen the models back away from the risk of being very dry in this corridor. It's now pushed this pretty far south into western and southern Texas, into Mexico, as to where we could have the driest conditions. Week 2 forecasts, this is how things are shaping up. So remember, the split flow doing this, and then this becoming the active corridor. So that's what the GFS is suggesting, and this is what the European is suggesting. So you can see the drier signals coming in for the west, but again, that flow doing something like this, that's going to really increase precip for some places that have been relatively dry. Now this morning is a cold one down in Florida. All right, we've even seen some frost pictures down here, but very mild in the warm sector of that storm, and that's what's going to support the risk for those stronger storms here, potentially in Iowa and Illinois. So from Monday's highs into Tuesday, the warm sector moves east. Here's Wednesday, getting into Thursday, just continued very mild conditions through most of this week across the eastern part of the country. But you see the establishment of more colder air beginning in the western United States. And as we play out there day 5 through 10, which is what's shown here, this is kind of the beginning of the real shift away from this incredibly mild start to 2023 into a pattern that's going to feature more blocking in the Pacific, colder air finally getting displaced from the northern latitudes into the Canadian prairie, into the western United States. I just think the last holdout for the warmer air will be the East Coast, given that subtropical ridge that's been sitting in place here. I think that's going to be a major component. What could make this miss would be any sort of downstream blocking, setting up maybe over Greenland, over Scandinavia. That's two areas I'll be watching carefully. And the other piece of this is what's going on with the polar vortex. By the end of this week, we will see the polar vortex see two kind of ridges deep in the stratosphere pushing in, elongating and stretching the polar vortex. These kind of disruptions, as we start to see them happen, increase the risk in the next few weeks of displacing some really cold air in the troposphere, the layer of the atmosphere that we live in. So this just is something that puts a lot of us kind of on alert. We're like, all right, we've seen a disruption. We need to watch for the linking between this in the stratosphere and what goes on here in the troposphere. Maybe the more important thing right now in terms of just some big commodities is what's happening now in South America. We continue to see very wet weather in central Brazil and eastern Brazil, and this is where a crop is finishing. The models have trended drier in Mato Grosso, parts of Goiás, Tocantins, Rondônia, Pará, these areas. This is where we're harvesting soybeans, but we are planting quickly behind it corn. So the slowdown of the monsoon temporarily, and I'll talk about this in tonight's in-depth video, is giving us a dry signal here. But the models have continued to trend wetter for much of Argentina, with rains coming in this upcoming weekend. And that is going to be an important signal, because while it may not help the early season crop that's just undergone such incredible drought and heat, it's an improving signal for Argentina as the Antarctic oscillation falls off and just more fronts start to come through this area. So a lot going on in South America to be watching here as we kind of go out of one season and start the next in terms of harvesting soybeans and planting corn in the north. So we'll keep an eye on it, and I'll report back to you again tomorrow morning. Thanks.